Hi, my name is Jennifer Easley, and I am the Treasurer of Texas PTA. Thank you for joining me today. This workshop focuses on preparing you to serve as the Treasurer of your PTA, develops your leadership skills, and provides you information about the many resources available to you. As a PTA, we are here to make every child's potential a reality by engaging and empowering families and communities to advocate for all children. We want to make sure that everything we do is in support of that mission. The PTA purposes can be found in your bylaws. Be sure to familiarize yourself with them so that you can be the strongest leader for your PTA. As a statewide organization, Texas PTA values collaboration, commitment, diversity, respect, and accountability. PTA observes the national standards for family-school partnerships. All PTAs should be welcoming all families into the school community, communicating effectively, supporting student success, speaking up for every child, sharing power, and collaborating with the community. As a board member, you should be a graduate of the required foundations training. You should also submit a plan of work. The local PTA bylaws state that all board members must complete a plan of work, and remember that plans of work must be presented and approved by the board at a board meeting. Review the bylaws and standing rules of your PTA. Request a copy annually in the fall, as national and Texas often make changes to the template. Keep in mind that the Texas PTA Standards of Continuing Affiliation are attached to the bylaws and outline how a PTA maintains their active and in good standing status with Texas PTA. You should maintain a procedure book, attend all meetings of both the board and the membership, sign the confidentiality, ethics, and conflict of interest policy, review minutes of each meeting of the PTA, review all financial reports, help recruit new members to the PTA, and remember that it is the job of all board members to do this. Your PTA serves as the front door to our association. You should seek out families in your school and community to encourage them to join and make a difference in a child's life. Help recruit new PTA leaders. A personal ask and connection go a long way. We will now go through the basic responsibilities of treasurers, and keep in mind that these are all listed in your bylaws. We will go through each of these in more detail as we move through the presentation. The treasurer has custody of all funds of the association. They also serve as the chair of the Budget and Finance Committee, present a written and verbal financial report at board and membership meetings and as requested by the board and membership. They maintain books of account and records including bank statements, receipts, budgets, invoices, paid receipts, and canceled checks in accordance with the records retention policy, make disbursements in accordance with the budget adopted by the membership. They're authorized to sign on all bank accounts and tax documents if the president is prohibited by terms of employment. They present a preliminary annual report, budget to actual, at the last membership meeting, complete and file all necessary tax documents, and present books of account and records to the Financial Reconciliation Committee. Some additional responsibilities of the treasurer include preparing a plan of work, a sample of which can be found in the Treasurer's Resource Guide. The treasurer is one position that needs a hard copy procedure book due to the records that need to be kept and information reported. As chair of the Budget and Finance Committee, the treasurer presents the proposed budget. The treasurer then presents any proposed amendments for approval throughout the year. If the treasurer has not received requests for checks to be sent to Texas PTA for dues, he or she should contact the membership chair or VP for a roster and PTA funds request form, as well as verify that the state and national dues, escrow, or liability account balances are correct. The treasurer should annually electronically file and have accepted the Form 990 within 60 days of the fiscal year end as part of the Texas PTA Standards of Continuing Affiliation. This is earlier than as required by the IRS, but the outgoing treasurer will have the information available and must file this return. He or she should complete it as soon as possible following the close of the fiscal year. To get started, along with the reconciled checkbook, you should have a copy of the most recent financial reconciliation. If the books have not been reconciled, do not take possession of the books until they are. Know what your EIN is and where your sales tax permit is. Your EIN can be found in the first paragraph of your bylaws. Ensure that the signature card at the bank has been updated with the most recent signers' names. If you use online banking, now is the time to change the password so that only the current signers can access the account. If you're using a credit or debit card, make sure that those signers are updated also. If you're not comfortable with the financial management system that was used before, don't feel like you have to use it. Use what works best for you. Texas PTA offers a $25 Windows-based financial management tool. MyPTEZ, which provides a free membership software tracking program for PTAs in Texas, offers a web-based financial software at a fee. There are many other programs and online systems available. Whichever system you choose, you need to maintain a general ledger with all transactions recorded on it from the beginning of the year through to the end. All income and expenses should be recorded in the appropriate budget category. Refer to your PTA's records retention policy regarding the financial records. The checkbook should be balanced, and the bank statement should be reconciled to the records each month. The bank statement should come to the school, not an individual, and per the bylaws, a non-signer is appointed to review the bank statement prior to giving it to the treasurer. Texas PTA also recommends that the original copy of the statement review is given to the secretary, who presents the report to the executive board. The statement review by a non-signer form is available on the Texas PTA Treasurer webpage. There are some basic principles of PTA financial management. Authorizing expenditures is the same as approving the budget. Insurance will be discussed in more detail later in the presentation. 2 people are required to count money at the same time. The second counter can be the treasurer. Dues should be sent to Texas PTA at least monthly. Establish a system for volunteers to get cash to the treasurer for deposit at the bank in a timely manner. As we need a funds request and a receipt or invoice for all checks written, a blank check is never acceptable practice. We do not just give a check to the school. This does not mean we cannot purchase things for the school, but when we do, we give the school a letter detailing what the money is to be used for and requesting a copy of the receipt once the purchase has been made. You can find a sample letter on the Texas PTA Treasurer webpage. All purchases, donations, and fundraisers must be approved by the PTA membership for authorization to expend and collect funds. Let's walk through the financial processes from budgeting to closing the year out. Before the fiscal year ends, a Budget and Finance Committee presents the proposed budget for the next fiscal year for approval at the annual membership meeting. Check your standing rules for any requirements for service on that committee. The Budget and Finance Committee studies the current year's budget versus actual report to determine how well that budget met the association's needs, considers requests for new programs or fundraisers, and reviews any plans of work submitted and approved. It's understandable that not all PTA's plans will be finalized this far in advance, so the budget need only include those expense and income items that have been planned at the time it is developed. Here are some things to consider when working with the budget. Only the local portion of the dues is listed as income. The national and Texas portion is listed outside the budget in an escrow or liability line. Escrow or liability is a fancy way of saying that the money that does not belong to the PTA is put aside. List both the income and expenses of any fundraiser. Sales tax is also held in an escrow or liability line. List the beginning balance and the balance to be carried forward on your budget worksheet either as income and expense lines or before and after the income and expense lines, depending on the financial software being used. We can't say it enough. Membership must authorize our fundraising and expenses through approval of the budget or amendments. Budget line items need to clearly indicate the intent. Remember, your membership can always amend the budget to add or update line items as needed. Petty cash is not a budget item. And if an event needs petty cash, a check is written to the chair responsible for that budget line and redeposited using the same budget line. For example, book fare. The initial budget is presented by the treasurer, who is chair of the Budget and Finance Committee, item by item. It's presented to the executive board for consideration and to the membership for consideration and approval. This budget is then approved by a majority vote of the membership. If making amendments, you can just read the amendment. To determine your PTA's quorum at board and membership meetings, check your bylaws. Here is an example of a proposed budget. Notice that the beginning balance plus the budgeted income balances with the budgeted expenses plus the balance to carry forward. This sample can be found in the Treasurer's Resource Guide and on the Texas PTA Treasurer's webpage. The budget may be amended at any time without notice to meet funding needs, to adjust changes in income, or if an expense will be over the budgeted line item. Amendments require a 2/3 vote of the membership for approval. Each amendment is presented as it is currently budgeted as well as the proposed amendment. For example, if you would like to increase the current reflections expense line by $50, you would propose to increase the reflections expense of $200 by $50. Remember, the budget needs to balance. Adjustments in income require an adjustment to another income or expense line. Alternatively, the balance carry forward amount can be adjusted to maintain this balance. Depending on the software your PTA uses, the carry forward amount might be referred to as unallocated reserves. To propose a budget amendment, simply add an additional column to your budget with the amendments listed. The Texas PTA Treasurer software can generate this for you. If the software you are using does not have the proposed budget amendment functionality, either run your report to a spreadsheet program and add a proposed budget column, or simply read the proposed amendments with your motion. Once the newly elected and appointed board members approve their plans of work, the treasurer can make recommendations on budget amendments to align the current budget with the new plans of work. You always have a budget in place, so you are not creating a new one, but amending the one that was approved at the annual meeting in the spring. When deciding how to budget PTA funds, always look to the purposes of PTA. If an action or expenditure cannot be tied to one of those 5 purposes, then reconsider the action. All funds raised by the PTA belong to the PTA and may not be commingled with the funds of the school or any other entity. PTA funds are not intended to supplement the school's budget or activity fund or to be given to the school outright. Raise only those funds that are necessary to meet the needs of the year's activities and projects as outlined in the budget. If there is sufficient carryover from previous years, then there may be no need to fundraise at all. Fundraisers must be approved by the membership, always. When planning fundraisers, remember, schedule carefully, look for conflicts. You don't want to be competing with other groups at school. Coordinate with your principal. No door-to-door sales by children under 17 without adult supervision, and identify any conflict of interest. If a PTA member bids on a fundraiser, they need to sign the confidentiality, ethics, and conflict of interest agreement and should not participate in the vote to approve the fundraiser. When planning the year's activities, PTA should use the 3-to-1 rule. For every fundraising activity, there should be at least 3 non-fundraising projects aimed at helping children or advocating for improvements or education. Programs are varied. Many schools participate in the National PTA Reflections Program, recognizing students' fine arts. PTA programs can be a kinder parent first day of school breakfast, a bike rodeo, an incoming pre-K student story time, or a drug and alcohol awareness event. Giving scholarships to graduating seniors or grants to assist teachers with classroom educational materials can also be PTA programs. A deposit form and procedures protect the PTA and individuals handling the money. This form may be reproduced or purchased as a 3-part form from Texas PTA. At least 2 people should always count the money at the same time. The money and the signed PTA deposit form should be given to the treasurer for deposit. All parties who sign the deposit form should retain a copy of the signed form after they have signed. Camera phones work well for this. This is what the Texas PTA deposit form looks like. You can reproduce this or purchase the 3-part form from Texas PTA. This form can also be found in the Treasurer's Resource Guide. It is important that the membership approves any online collection or credit card system. The same procedures for depositing funds need to be followed. If transfers are made daily to the PTA bank account, a weekly summary of those transfers can be done on one deposit form. Refer to the Texas PTA e-commerce policy for more information. Ensure that you have enough signers to be able to reimburse the signers, especially if your PTA requires 2 signatures on checks per your standing rules. If there are not enough funds in a budget line, you may reimburse up to the budget and then wait for a budget amendment to reimburse the rest. This is why it is critical that your board members know what their budget is and keep track themselves of what they have spent. All payments need a clear paper trail, so any request for funds should have a funds request form attached to clearly indicate the budget line of the expense. If you have a till for change for a carnival or school store, you cannot reimburse someone out of that till or pay a vendor's bill. A check would be issued to an individual or business. It is important that your membership has approved your use of debit or credit cards prior to use. There's an e-commerce policy on the Texas PTA governance page that must be adopted or added to your standing rules in order to use debit or credit cards. Here is a sample PTA funds request form. Notice that all expenses must be associated with an existing budget line item. When funds are requested, this form should be completed and receipts attached. Establish procedures with your board on how funds requests are submitted, when they can get reimbursement, and how long they have to get those receipts turned in. This form can also be found in the Treasurer's Resource Guide. If a gift card is donated to subsidize PTA expenses, a fund request form with receipts attached should be submitted for review by the Financial Reconciliation Committee. For example, you receive a gift card from a grocery store and choose to use it to purchase breakfast for teachers. The receipt from that purchase should be attached to a PTA funds request form so that the Financial Reconciliation Committee can see that the gift card was used for PTA purposes. If the donated gift card is put in a basket or given as a door prize, it does not require a receipt. When purchasing gift cards, remember that we recommend to be retail specific, not generic cards that can be used anywhere. The value should not exceed $25 and care should be taken to store them safely. An up-to-date financial report is presented at every board and membership meeting. The period covered should be from meeting to meeting, not first of the month to the end of the month. You can choose to run reports from the day of the last meeting to the day before the current meeting, or the day after the last meeting to the day of the current meeting. Just be consistent. Reports are detailed and they include check numbers and payees. The beginning balance should match the ending balance from the previous report. There is no excuse not to have a financial report. If you are going to miss a meeting, the report should be given to the president prior to the meeting so that the president can give the report. Not having a financial report is a red flag. Here is a sample financial report. Note, the sales tax as well as the national and Texas portion of dues has been noted in escrow or liabilities. The financial report will show transactions from one report to the next, whereas the budget report shows totals for the entire year to date. The sample budget report gives you a bigger picture of the financial status of the PTA. You can see the budget compared to the year-to-date numbers. This is essential for the board and helpful for your members. The reports are not presented for approval, just for information, and they are filed for review by the Financial Reconciliation Committee during the next reconciliation. The The reports are attached to the meeting minutes. Financial records are retained for 7 years. A preliminary annual report is given at the annual meeting per the bylaws. A final annual report is completed by the treasurer at the end of the fiscal year and provided to the Financial Reconciliation Committee. This report is presented at the first meeting of the year for information only and is not adopted. The annual report should look like the annual budget, but with year-end actual figures. A PTA is organized and operated as a 501c3, meaning we are nonprofit, charitable, and educational. We provide no individual benefit, meaning that members should not profit in any way from what the association does. We do no substantial lobbying activity and no political activity in support of a candidate or political party. PTAs have two taxing authorities, the Internal Revenue Service, or IRS, and the State of Texas Controller. Let's review the IRS requirements first. A Form 990 is an informational return for a 501c3 organization. The IRS is required to revoke the nonprofit tax-exempt status of any organization failing to file a 990 for 3 consecutive years. This means you would no longer be a 501c3 organization. The president is listed as the principal officer. The Texas PTA Standards of Continuing Affiliation require PTAs to annually file and have accepted a 990 tax return with the IRS within 60 days of the fiscal year end. They must file electronically. It's very important that the 990 be filed or the form be completed immediately following the fiscal year end so that the current president and treasurer can complete the form. The longer you wait, the more likely there will be an issue with gathering information. All PTAs are required to electronically file one of the following IRS 990 returns. A 990N, which is very simple to complete, meaning your gross receipts are $50,000 or less. A 990EZ in Schedules A and O, meaning your gross receipts are less than $200,000 and total assets are less than $500,000. Or a 990 in Schedules A and O, meaning your gross receipts are greater than $200,000 or your total assets are more than $500,000. Do not ignore correspondence from the IRS. For more information, see the Treasurer's Resource Guide or visit the Texas PTA Treasurer's page. These are some forms your PTA might need to file. If you pay anyone for services over $600, you are required to file a 1099 NEC, non-employee compensation form, and a 1096 summary report. The most common example is for a DJ. Another is an artist to perform or paint a mural. If a PTA sells taxable items at times other than the 2 tax-free days discussed on the next slide, a sales tax permit is required. PTAs are required to collect and remit sales tax to the state controller annually unless you collect large amounts of sales tax, in which case the state may require quarterly payments. State sales tax reports must be filed on time to avoid penalties. The return is based on the calendar year, not your fiscal year, so the outgoing treasurer should leave a report of sales tax due January through the end of the fiscal year for the incoming treasurer. Reports must be filed even if no sales tax was collected for the reporting period. Note that PTAs are only considered the determined seller and therefore required to remit collected sales tax if the PTA purchases the product, sets the price, and does its own marketing. Otherwise, the vendor, such as a catalog fundraiser company or book fair company, will collect and remit the sales tax. The following forms can be found on the State Controller website. The tax exempt form, used when you are purchasing items to use for your PTA. There's no tax exempt number required for this form. The sales tax in use resale certificate for items that you purchase and plan to resell for your PTA. For example, you would use this when purchasing t-shirts to sell. The hotel occupancy tax exemption form, if you are staying at a hotel for PTA business, can also be found on the controller's website. 2 tax-free days or 24-hour periods per calendar year can be approved and recorded in the minutes at either an executive board or membership meeting prior to a sale event. A tax-free sale must not be a year-long activity such as a school store. The State Controller's Office has ruled that PTAs may consider advanced order sales fundraisers as one of their tax-free days, provided certain criteria are met. See the Treasurer's Guide for full details. The State Controller's Office has ruled that brochure and catalog sales are not eligible for tax-free declaration by the PTA because for these sales, the PTA is acting as an agent for the vendor who is the determined seller. The PTA collects sales tax on the sales price and remits it to the vendor to remit to the Controller's Office. A PTA can participate in the Texas Sales Tax Holiday Tax-Free Weekend. This event does not count towards your 2 tax-free days. Be sure to keep detailed records of sales tax collected and remitted to the State Controller and include that information on every financial report. PTAs are only exempt from paying tax on items that are purchased for the purpose of operating the PTA business. Examples include binders for board members, papers to print agendas, and minutes. PTAs are required to collect and remit taxes on taxable items sold, such as t-shirts or school supplies, except during tax-free days. If your PTA chooses to reimburse sales tax for a purchase at a specific vendor, as some stores will not accept the tax-exempt form, that should be detailed in the standing rules or voted on and recorded in the minutes of the executive board meeting. A best practice is to not reimburse sales tax. Operating a local PTA is much like running a small business. Businesses need insurance to protect their investment. The same is true for PTAs. Insurance is available in the following categories. Embezzlement, also known as fidelity bonding, is recommended to protect your money. General liability for events to protect your organization. Directors and officers or professional liability to protect your officers from accusations. Property, to replace PTA property if damaged or lost. Accident, medical endorsement to complement your general liability policy. At a minimum, embezzlement insurance or fidelity bonding in directors and officers or professional liability is recommended. We encourage you to call your insurance provider, such as AIM, to discuss the amount of coverage that is right for your PTA. As mentioned earlier, a non-signer must be appointed to open, review, and sign the bank statement prior to giving it to the treasurer. This is required for embezzlement insurance eligibility. The checklist for this is on the Texas PTA Treasurer webpage. For electronic viewing of the statement, review the e-commerce policy on the Texas PTA Policies webpage. A financial reconciliation must be completed at the close of the fiscal year. But a financial reconciliation must also be conducted when any authorized check signer is added or deleted on any bank account and at any time deemed necessary by the president or 3 or more members. This is not a witch hunt. The committee will find things. That's what they are called to do. This is an opportunity for the board to identify areas to work on for next year. The president appoints the Financial Reconciliation Committee. The committee is composed of not less than 3 members. No one who is an authorized signer on any bank account may serve on the committee, nor can they be married to or living in the same household as the signer on the account. The current secretary and the incoming treasurer may also not serve on this committee. The Financial Reconciliation Committee should use the checklist and form on the Texas PTA Treasurer's webpage. The checklist includes confirming that the appropriate 990 was filed. The 990 should be filed within 60 days of the year end, but can be filed at any time after the close of the fiscal year. The committee presents the report at the first regular membership meeting, and the report is adopted by the membership. The annual report should be attached and filed with the official records. This report is not the preliminary report that is presented at your annual meeting. The annual report that is attached to the financial reconciliation report covers your entire fiscal year. The outgoing treasurer should prepare a sales tax report for the incoming treasurer, complete the appropriate IRS Form 990, prepare all financial records for the Financial Reconciliation Committee, deliver materials to the Financial Reconciliation Committee chair, and be available to answer questions, and finally, enjoy all your free time once your duties are completed. Compiling and maintaining a complete record of your activities can be a huge help to those PTA leaders who follow behind you. Passing along important information to your successor gives them what they need to get started. Keep files of bylaws and standing rules, rosters and contact information, items related to your position, and any meeting documents. Every local PTA executive board member should be familiar with the standards of continuing affiliation. The standards delineate all of the essential requirements PTAs must maintain in order to reap the many benefits of being part of Texas PTA. These standards can be found toward the end of every resource guide. Your council PTA and field service representative are excellent and convenient resources for you. Texas PTA staff and board members are also here to answer any of your questions. Their toll-free number is 1-800-TALK-PTA. The Texas PTA Treasurer webpage contains many useful resources that are available to PTA members, including the Treasurer Resource Guide and the Texas PTA Financial Reporting Software. You can reach the Texas PTA Finance Department at finance@txpta.org and the Texas PTA Treasurer at treasurer@txpta.org. National PTA's website, www.pta.org, is another valuable resource. Thank you for attending Texas PTA Basics Treasurer. We hope you have a great year and appreciate you stepping up on your PTA.